6 guns aimed at Sam Bennett in the middle of Prescott's main street. Dutch Morgan's voice cut through the silence. "That's far enough, Bennett." Sam's hand hung loose near his Colt. Then he moved. The first shot disarmed the man to his right. The second spun Dutch around before his gun cleared leather. Behind them, unnoticed, the marshal's office doors burst open. "Federal Marshal, drop your weapons." Everything Sam had buried for 20 years was about to explode. But to understand how a quiet shopkeeper became the most wanted man in Arizona territory, we need to go back 3 days. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more Western tales. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Now let's start at the beginning. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Sam Bennett poured it into Rachel's old cup, the one with the crack she'd mended with egg white and patience 3 years before she died. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Sam Bennett poured it into Rachel's old cup, the one with the crack she'd mended with egg white and patience 3 years before she died. His fingers traced the repaired seam, feeling the slight ridge where broken had become whole again. Or as whole as broken things ever got. 4:30 in the morning. The desert night still clung to Red Creek Junction, but the eastern horizon was already bleeding pink and gold. Sam sat on the porch of his small house behind Bennett's Mercantile and Supply, watching the day arrive with the same careful attention he gave everything. Sunrise was different every morning. You had to pay attention or you missed it. The town was quiet. 200 souls, give or take, scattered across buildings that Arizona's sun and wind had weathered to the color of old bones. A good town, an honest town. The kind of place where a man could disappear into the rhythm of ordinary days and ordinary work, where the past stayed past if you were careful enough, quiet enough, invisible enough. Sam sipped his coffee, grimaced. Too hot, too strong, perfect. At 5 o'clock, he walked through the connecting door into the store. The smell greeted him like an old friend. Leather flour dust, gun oil, tobacco, coffee beans, the faint sweetness of peppermint sticks in their glass jar by the register. 20 years of commerce had soaked these smells into the wood, into the very air. He lit the lamps, swept the floor, arranged the front display, beans, cornmeal, salt pork. The foundations of frontier survival, unremarkable and essential. At 6, he unlocked the front door and turned the sign to open. Nobody came for the first hour. They rarely did. But Sam stood behind the counter anyway, hands resting on the worn wood eyes, scanning the empty street through the front window. Old habits. Ranger habits. Always know your exits. Always watch the approaches. Always keep your back to the wall. The counter had a particular geography that only he understood. A heavy wrench rested beneath the cash box, positioned for a right-handed grab. The big knife for cutting rope and twine was blade out in its holder 3 inches from his left hand. The shelf behind him held canned goods, stacked in a pattern that would collapse and scatter if shoved hard, creating noise and obstacle. Nothing looked defensive. Everything was. Rachel used to laugh about that, gently, sadly. "You're building a fortress out of flour sacks," she'd said once. "Just being prepared," he'd answered. "For what, Sam?" "The war's over. All the wars are over." But she'd been wrong about that. Wars never ended. They just moved inside, became the permanent residence of a man's soul, waiting for any excuse to march out again. The morning passed in its slow way. Martha Hayes bought fabric. Young Daniel Fletcher came in for penny candy and left with peppermints clutched in his small fist. Reverend Josiah Graves stopped by for tobacco and stayed to talk about nothing in particular, the way old friends do. Sam listened more than he spoke. That was his way now. Listen, nod, smile slightly, say little. The less you said, the less people knew. The less they knew, the safer everyone stayed. At 11:30, Captain William Dawson limped through the door. Bill was 67, lean as a whip, with a cavalry officer's bearing that 30 years of civilian life hadn't quite erased. He'd served in the war between the states, fought Comanche afterwards, retired with honor, and a bullet-shattered knee that ached before rain. He and Sam had crossed paths during the Ranger years, back when both of them were younger and considerably more foolish. Bill was the only person in Red Creek Junction who knew who Sam had been. The only one Sam trusted with that knowledge. "Sam, well," Bill said, lowering himself carefully onto the stool by the counter. "You're going to die of boredom before any bullet gets you." Sam didn't look up from the inventory sheet he was pretending to study. "That's the plan, Bill. Martha at the saloon says you haven't had a drink in 3 months. A man needs whiskey, Sam." A man needs peace. Whiskey just postpones it. Bill chuckled, a dry sound like wind through dead grass. He pulled out his pipe, began the ritual of packing and lighting. The familiar scent of tobacco smoke drifted across the counter. You know what Rachel would say if she saw you like this? Bill asked. Sam's hands stilled on the inventory sheet. After a moment, he looked up. She'd say, I'm finally learning to live slow. Bill's eyes, still sharp despite age and hard use, studied his friend carefully. No, Bill said quietly. She'd say you're waiting to die. The words landed heavier than they should have. Sam felt them settle somewhere behind his ribs, in that hollow place where Rachel used to live before consumption took her. Before 3 years of grief had calcified that hollow into something hard and permanent. Before Sam could respond, the door banged open. Daniel Fletcher burst in, all 10 years of him flushed and breathless. Mr. Bennett riders, coming 6 of them, and they're heavy-armed. Sam's hand moved without conscious thought, dropping toward his hip, where a gun should have been, but wasn't. 20 years of civilian life, and the reflex was still there, instant and automatic. Bill noticed. His eyes narrowed. Sam straightened, forcing his hand back to the counter. How far out? He asked, his voice level. Just clear of the ridge. Be here in 5 minutes, maybe. Sam nodded. Go tell your mama to stay inside, you too. The boy hesitated. You think there's trouble? I think it's best to be careful. Go on now. Daniel ran. The door swung shut behind him. Bill stood, his hand dropping to the old Navy Colt he still wore under his coat. 6 riders, heavy-armed. That's not a social call. No, Sam agreed. He moved to the window, watching the eastern road. The riders appeared first as dark shapes against the bright sky, then as individual men on individual horses. They came at an easy pace, not hurried, not cautious, confident. They rode like men who had every right to be wherever they chose to be. Sam's eyes picked out details automatically. The lead rider sat his saddle with his left shoulder lower than his right. Old wound. The big man to his left had tattoos visible on his forearms. The lean one, bringing up the rear, carried his rifle across his saddle in a way that spoke of professional skill. But it was the leader that held Sam's attention. Something in the way he rode. Something in the tilt of his head. Something Sam recognized from a long time ago. From a different life in a different world. Memory stirred. Texas. Fort Griffin, 1871. A warrant for a Confederate deserter named Clayton Wade. Sam's jaw tightened. You know them, Bill asked. Maybe, long time ago. The riders reached the main street. Instead of riding to the hitching posts, they stopped in the middle of the road. 6 horses, 6 men, all armed, all watching the mercantile. The town went silent. Dogs stopped barking. The wind fell. Even the heat seemed to press down harder, as if the very air knew something was about to break. Sam stood in the doorway, hands visible and empty. Bill moved to stand behind him, shotgun held low but ready. The leader of the riders looked at Sam. Really looked. His eyes were the color of old steel, hard and measuring. Recognition flickered there, and something else. Something that might have been regret. Clayton Wade. 20 years older, 20 years harder, but unmistakably the same man Sam had tracked across 3 states and then in the end deliberately failed to catch. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The 6 riders and the shopkeeper studied each other across 30 feet of Arizona dust. Then Clayton tipped his hat. A small gesture, almost ironic. He turned his horse and the others followed. They rode down the street past the mercantile toward the saloon at the far end of town. Sam watched them go. His hands were steady, but his heart was beating faster than it had in 3 years. Bill exhaled slowly. That was close to something, he said. Yeah. You want to tell me what? Sam shook his head. He stepped back inside, began closing the shutters on the windows, moving methodically, preparing. Sam, Bill said, talk to me. Sam finished the last shutter. The store was dim now, lamp-lit and shadowy. He turned to face his friend. You remember Fort Griffin when I was hunting that Confederate deserter? Wade, Clayton Wade. You never brought him in. I let him go, told him to disappear, start clean. Bill's expression hardened. And now he's back. Now he's back. Why, boy? Sam moved to the back room to a crate he hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was his old gun belt. The leather was still supple, still serviceable. The Colt Peacemaker gleamed dully in the lamplight. I don't know yet, Sam said quietly. But whatever brought Clayton Wade to Red Creek Junction, it's not going to be good. The sun had set hours ago. Clayton Wade sat by the fire at his camp 2 miles outside town, methodically cleaning his Colt. The familiar motions were soothing. Pull the cylinder, check each chamber, run the cleaning rod through the barrel, wipe down the frame, reload, holster. His hands shook slightly. Not from fear, never from fear. From the piece of shrapnel still lodged near his left shoulder blade, souvenir of a Union artillery barrage at Shiloh in 1862. 29 years ago, and some mornings, he could barely lift his arm. Getting old, he thought. Getting old and getting tired. Dutch Morgan sat across the fire, sharpening his knife with long, deliberate strokes. The serpent tattoo on his neck seemed to writhe in the firelight. Dutch was 36, strong as a bull, and mean enough to make up for his lack of brains. "That shopkeeper," Dutch said without looking up. "He saw you different. You two acquainted." Clayton didn't answer immediately. He finished reassembling the Colt, spun the cylinder, once listened to the smooth mechanical click. "Long time ago," he said finally. "He's got ranger eyes. I seen him before." Clayton's hands stilled. "He's nobody, just a man selling beans." Dutch grinned, showing teeth too white in his weathered face. "Then should be easy." "Nothing about this is easy." Finn McReady emerged from the darkness beyond the firelight, moving silent as smoke. The Irish sniper was the youngest of them at 31, but the most dangerous. Finn could put a bullet through a playing card at 300 yards in a crosswind. Clayton had seen him do it. "Blackwell wants the box by Friday," Finn said in his soft Dublin accent. "That's 3 days. We burn the town, we get it faster." Clayton stood facing both men. The firelight made harsh shadows of his features. "No burning, we do this quiet." Dutch stopped sharpening. "Since when you go soft?" Clayton's hand moved to his gun, not threatening, just resting. Dutch noticed and fell silent. "Since Blackwell has my daughter," Clayton said, his voice flat and final. "I don't want this, any of this, but I'll do it clean or I won't do it at all." Finn studied him with those pale Irish eyes. "You knew the shopkeeper back when?" It wasn't a question. Clayton sat back down, suddenly exhausted. 20 years ago, Sam Bennett was the best tracker the Texas Rangers ever had. They called him Deadeye Sam. He could shoot the wings off a fly at 100 paces. More importantly, he could read a man, know what he was thinking before he knew it himself. "So why'd he let you go?" Finn asked. Clayton stared into the fire. The flames painted his memories in shades of orange and gold. "Because I told him the truth. I wasn't a deserter. I was a survivor. My company got wiped out at Shiloh. I was the only one left alive. When I woke up 3 days later in a field hospital, the war was still going, but my war was over. I couldn't go back. Couldn't face seeing more boys die for someone else's cotton and someone else's pride." He paused, remembering Sam Bennett in a dusty Texas town, gun-drawn, warrant in hand. "I told him all that, expected him to laugh, put a bullet in me, or drag me back to hang. But he just looked at me for a long time. Then he said, 'Go, disappear, become someone else. But if I ever hear your name again in connection with anything criminal, I'll find you and I'll finish this.'" "And," Dutch prompted, "and I disappeared. Met a woman in Santa Fe. Good woman. We had a daughter. I worked freight wagons, saved money, stayed clean. For 20 years, I kept my word." Finn's expression hadn't changed. "Until Blackwell." Clayton's hands clenched. "Until Blackwell found me 6 months ago. Showed me a photograph of Emily at her school. Told me what would happen to her if I didn't do exactly what he wanted." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called and received no answer. "So here I am," Clayton said quietly, "about to break the one promise I ever kept. And the man I have to destroy is the man who gave me the chance to make that promise in the first place." Dutch spat into the fire. "Life's a bastard." "Yeah," Clayton agreed, "it is." Meanwhile, in Red Creek Junction, Sam Bennett sat at his small kitchen table, Rachel's journal open before him. He had read it 100 times in the 3 years since her death. Knew every word, every pen stroke, every place where her handwriting had wavered when the consumption made her hands shake. But he always stopped at the same page. Never went further, never read the last entries. Couldn't bear to see her handwriting, getting weaker, the words more desperate, the knowledge of her approaching death seeping through every line. Tonight, for the first time, he turned to the final pages. Rachel's last entry was dated 3 days before she died. The handwriting was spidery, uneven, but still unmistakably hers. My dearest Sam, it read, if you are reading the end first, which you always do, you impatient man, know this, I didn't want to burden you. You've carried enough blood already. But someone had to remember, someone had to write it down. The railroad is coming. Cornelius Blackwell is buying land cheap from families who don't understand its value. Judge Crane signs fraudulent deeds. When families resist, accidents happen. Houses burn, wells go bad. Cattle sicken and die. And sometimes people simply disappear. I've documented everything. Names, dates, amounts. If anything happens to me, look in the schoolhouse. Third board from the east wall. Everything you need is there. Don't come after them, Sam. You promised me you'd left that life behind. But if they come after you, then you were always going to end up here anyway. I love you, even your violent past, because that past made you the gentle man I married. You're Rachel. Sam's hands trembled as he closed the journal. He stood moved to the corner of the room where an old crate sat covered in dust. He knelt, opened it. Inside lay the remnants of another life. A Texas Ranger badge, tarnished but still solid. A Winchester rifle meticulously cleaned and oiled every month despite never being fired. And a Colt Peacemaker, the kind of gun that had won the West and damned the men who carried it. Sam lifted the Colt. The weight was familiar, intimate. His finger found the trigger guard automatically. Muscle memory, 20 years dormant, surging back in an instant. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Sam was moving before conscious thought, the Colt coming up his body, positioning itself in the shadows beside the window. Years of training overriding years of peace. A rock lay on the floor, shards of window glass scattered around it. Outside, laughter. Dutch Morgan's voice loud and mocking. Old man Blackwell wants to talk tomorrow noon at the saloon. Don't make him come find you. Hoof beats. Fading into the night. Sam stood motionless in the darkness. The Colt still raised his heart, hammering. Slowly he lowered the gun. Bill Dawson appeared in the doorway, breathing hard, his own gun drawn. Sam, you all right? Yeah. Bill's eyes dropped to the Colt in Sam's hand. His expression changed, became something harder, more worried. Sam, don't. Don't what? Don't become him again. The man with that gun. Rachel wouldn't want it. Sam looked at the Colt, at his hand holding it, at the way his fingers knew exactly where to rest, how much pressure to apply, where the balance point was. Rachel's dead, he said quietly, and the men who killed her just threw a rock through my window. Bill's face went pale. Killed her, Sam? She died of consumption. Doc Kane treated her for months. Sam turned to face his friend. His eyes were cold now, empty of everything except a terrible certainty. Did she, or did we just want to believe that? He walked past Bill into the night toward the mercantile, toward the gun belt he hadn't worn in 20 years. Noon in the Arizona Territory was not a time for reasonable men to be outdoors. The sun turned the sky white with heat, baked the ground, hard as iron, made the very air shimmer with waves of distortion. Most of Red Creek Junction sheltered in whatever shade they could find, waiting for the worst of the day to pass. Sam Bennett walked down the center of the main street in full sun, and he was not reasonable. He dressed carefully. Clean shirt, dark vest, his Sunday trousers. The gun belt rode low on his hips, positioned just right, the Colt sitting in its holster, like it had never left. No badge. The Texas Rangers were 20 years in his past, but the man who'd worn that badge was walking these streets again, and everyone who saw him knew it. The townsfolk watched from windows and doorways. They'd seen Sam every day for 15 years. The quiet shopkeeper, the polite widower, the man who never raised his voice, never made trouble, never drew attention. That man was gone. The man walking toward the saloon moved like violence, barely contained, like a storm before it breaks. Bill Dawson limped alongside him, shotgun cradled in his arms. This is a mistake, Bill said. Probably. You don't have to go in there. Yeah, I do. Why? Sam didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was complicated and simple at the same time. They'd come to his town. They'd threatened his peace. They'd invoked Rachel's name. And somewhere in the dark places where Sam had buried Deadeye Bennett, that old ghost had woken up hungry. The saloon doors stood open. Sam could see inside. Clayton Wade sat at a table in the center of the room alone. Dutch Morgan and three other men stood at the bar. Finn McReady was on the second-floor balcony, rifle across his lap, commanding a clear view of the entire room. Professional, prepared, dangerous. Sam pushed through the doors. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in the shade of the saloon. The smell hit him immediately. Whiskey, sweat, tobacco, the sour tang of beer and fear. The bartender, a nervous man named Lyle, was wiping the same glass over and over, his hands shaking. Clayton looked up as Sam entered. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition. Memory. The ghost of a debt owed and a promise kept. Then Clayton's face hardened. Business. Sam walked to the table and sat down. He didn't remove his hat, didn't say hello, just sat, hands visible on the table, close enough to his gun, but not threatening. The bartender brought 2 glasses of whiskey without being asked. His hands shook so badly that liquid slopped over the rim. Much obliged, Lyle, Sam said quietly. Why don't you take a break? Go visit your sister in Tucson for a few days. Lyle looked at Clayton, then at Sam, then practically ran for the door. Clayton picked up his glass, drank, set it down with deliberate care. You don't remember me, he said. Sam's eyes were level calm. Fort Griffin, 1871. You had a limp back then. Shrapnel left hip. Clayton's eyebrows rose fractionally. It moved to my shoulder. Shrapnel does that. They both drank. The whiskey was cheap and burned going down. Neither man showed it. You let me go, Clayton said. You weren't the man I was hunting, just the name on the warrant. Blackwell doesn't make that distinction. Sam leaned forward slightly. His voice was quiet, but it carried. What does Blackwell want? What your wife found. Papers, maps, evidence. Rachel died 3 years ago, natural causes. Clayton's expression flickered. Something that might have been pity. Natural for a woman who asked too many questions. Sam's hand moved under the table. Not fast, not obvious. Just shifted 6 inches closer to the Colt. Clayton saw it, didn't react. Careful, Sam said softly. I'm always careful. That's why I'm still alive. Rachel died of consumption. Doc Kane treated her for 8 months. I watched her waste away day by day. There was nothing unnatural about it. Clayton reached into his coat. Dutch at the bar tensed. Sam's hand dropped to his gun, not drawing, just touching. Clayton pulled out a folded telegram, slid it across the table. Read it. Sam picked up the telegram with his left hand, keeping his right near the Colt. His eyes scanned the words, then stopped. Read again. The blood drained from his face. The telegram was from a doctor in Santa Fe, a specialist in poisons. It detailed the symptoms of arsenic poisoning administered in small doses over several months, how it mimicked consumption, how most frontier doctors wouldn't recognize the difference, how 5 other families in the territory had died the same way in the last 3 years, all families who'd refused to sell their land to Cornelius Blackwell's railroad. Sam's hand crushed the telegram. His voice came out raw. This is a lie. Is it? Or did you just want it to be natural, easier to grieve a disease than a murder? Sam stood so fast his chair toppled backward. The Colt was in his hand before the chair hit the floor, aimed directly at Clayton's heart. 15 feet away, Dutch drew. Finn's rifle swung toward Sam. Nobody fired. The saloon was frozen, a tableau of violence 1 second away from erupting. Clayton hadn't moved. His hands remained on the table, nowhere near his gun. He looked up at Sam with those tired steel eyes. Go ahead, Clayton said quietly. Won't change anything, won't bring her back, won't stop what's coming. Sam's hand was steady. The Colt didn't waver, but he didn't squeeze the trigger. What do you want? He asked again. Clayton stood slowly, hands still visible. The strong box Rachel hid, everything in it. You give it to me, by Friday we ride out. You don't. He paused. Blackwell owns half of Arizona territory. He's got judges, marshals, politicians. He can make this town disappear like it never existed. He can try. Sam, Clayton's voice held genuine regret. I don't want this, but I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You taught me that. Fort Griffin, remember, you chose to run instead of fight. chose to live instead of die for someone else's lost cause. Vic Clayton's laugh was bitter as alkali water. And 20 years later, here I am, fighting someone else's battle, dying by inches for someone else's greed. Some choices just take longer to kill you. Sam lowered the Colt, holstered it, turned toward the door. Dutch stepped into his path, big, smirking, confident. Boss didn't say you could leave. Move. Make me old man. Sam swung, fast for a man of 48, fast enough to surprise most men. But Dutch was 36 and had been fighting his whole life. He slipped the punch, drove his fist into Sam's ribs, right where an old wound had never quite healed. Pain exploded through Sam's side. He stumbled, gasping. Dutch pulled his gun. Dutch, Clayton's voice cracked like a whip. Stand down. Dutch hesitated. The gun stayed pointed at Sam's chest. I said stand down. Slowly, Dutch lowered the gun, smiled, stepped aside. Sam's straightened hand pressed to his ribs. He could feel them grinding together. Cracked, maybe broken. The pain made his vision blur. He walked past Dutch without looking at him, past Bill, who had his shotgun raised and aimed at Dutch's head, out into the brutal sunlight. Bill followed him outside, grabbed his arm. You all right? Sam shook him off. Fine. You're not fine. You're hurt. I said I'm fine. But he wasn't. 20 years ago, he would have disarmed Dutch in 2 seconds flat. 20 years ago, he was faster, stronger, harder. 20 years ago, he was Deadeye Sam Bennett, and men like Dutch didn't dare challenge him. Now he was just an aging shopkeeper with a broken rib and a past that didn't matter anymore. Bill's hand gripped his shoulder gentler this time. Sam, let it go. Give them whatever they want and let them ride out. Sam looked at his old friend, at the concern in those eyes, at the fear. I can't. Why not? Before Sam could answer, Reverend Graves appeared hurrying down the street as fast as his dignity would allow. His face was pale-stricken. Sam, he said, breathless, I need to tell you something. About Rachel's last days. Something she made me promise not to tell you unless they came back. Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach. Unless who came back? Graves glanced at the saloon at the men visible through the open doors. Unless Blackwell's men came back. Reverend Josiah Graves's office was in the back of the small church, a cramped room that smelled of old books and candle wax. He moved to his desk with the careful precision of a man carrying something fragile, opened a drawer, and removed a wooden box no bigger than a Bible. Sam stood in the doorway, still favoring his injured ribs. Bill had stayed outside to watch for trouble. Rachel came to me 2 days before she died, Graves said without looking up. He opened the box. Inside lay a single envelope, sealed with wax. She knew. Knew what? Graves finally met Sam's eyes. The Reverend was 54 years old, had ministered to this congregation for 15 years, had presided over Rachel's funeral. He'd baptized babies, married couples, buried the dead, and heard confessions that would have broken lesser men. But Sam had never seen him look afraid before. She knew she was poisoned. The words landed like stones dropping into still water. Ripples spreading outward, disturbing everything. Sam's hand found the back of a chair, gripped it. The wood creaked under his fingers. That's not possible. Doc Kane said consumption. Doc Kane is a good man and a fair physician, Graves said quietly. But he's a frontier doctor. He treats broken bones, bullet wounds, fevers. He wouldn't recognize arsenic poisoning. Rachel did. How? Graves opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in Rachel's handwriting. He didn't hand it to Sam. Not yet. First, he needed to explain. Your wife was an educated woman, Sam. Educated beyond what most frontier towns ever see. She read medical texts, kept current with the journals that came through on the stage. And she paid attention. He paused, gathering himself. 3 months before she died, her symptoms changed. The cough was still there, the weakness, the weight loss. But other things appeared. Nausea, tremors in her hands. Her hair started falling out. She noticed, and she remembered. Remembered what? 5 families in this territory who refused to sell their land to Blackwell's railroad. 5 families who all died within 6 months. Natural causes, according to Judge Crane's death certificates. No autopsies, quick burials. Sam felt the room tilt. He sat down heavily. She was investigating them. She was documenting them. Rachel wasn't a fighter, Sam. She was a teacher. She believed in the power of truth of evidence, of records that couldn't be denied or buried. Graves held out the letter. She wrote this 2 days before the end. Made me swear on my ordination that I wouldn't give it to you unless Blackwell's men came to Red Creek. She said if they did, it meant she'd been right, and it meant they were still hunting what she'd found. Sam took the letter. His hands were steady, but something inside him was shaking apart. The paper was good quality, the kind Rachel always used for important correspondence. Her handwriting filled both sides in her neat, careful script. Reading it felt like hearing her voice again, like she was sitting beside him speaking these words directly into his ear. "My dearest Sam," it began, "by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't grieve for me. I chose this path knowing where it led. I could have stopped investigating, could have stayed quiet, but that would make me complicit in what Blackwell is doing. It would make me a coward. And you didn't marry a coward. His men followed me for weeks. I knew what was coming. The poison in my tea, in my food, in the water I drank. Small amounts. Careful. Meant to look natural. So I hid everything. The maps showing his railroad route. The forged deeds Judge Crane signed. The testimonies from families he destroyed. The names of the men who did his dirty work. All of it wrapped in oilcloth buried under the third board from the east wall in the schoolhouse. Don't avenge me, Sam. That's not what I want. Revenge is just more violence, more blood, more souls damned for someone else's greed. But if they threaten this town, if they come for innocent people, then use what I found. Bring them to justice. Real justice. The kind that happens in courtrooms with judges and juries and the weight of law. Not the kind that happens at the end of a gun. I know who you were. I know what you're capable of. And I love you anyway, perhaps because of it. You were a violent man who chose peace. That's harder than being a peaceful man who's never had to choose. Be that man again, Sam. The one who chose peace. Not because he couldn't fight, but because he'd seen enough fighting to know it never really ends anything. I love you. Always have. Always will. Your Rachel. Sam read the letter 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. Each time he heard her voice more clearly. Each time the weight of what she was asking pressed down harder. When he finally looked up, tears were running down his face. He didn't bother wiping them away. 3 years, he said, his voice broken. 3 years I mourned her, thought God took her, accepted it as natural, as the way of things. It was easier than the truth, Graves said gently. The truth. Sam laughed, a sound with no humor in it. The truth is I failed her. I was so busy being peaceful, being quiet, being the man she wanted me to be, that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. You saw what she wanted you to see. She protected you, Sam. I didn't need protecting. The words came out harsh, angry. I needed to protect her. That was my job, to keep her safe. Graves said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response to a man's grief. Sam stood, walked to the small window. Outside, Red Creek Junction went about its business, unaware that the ground beneath it was shifting, that old debts were coming, due that peace was a luxury about to be revoked. Where does Doc Kane stand in this, he asked. Nowhere. She never told her. Did not want to put her at risk. And you? I'm a man of God. I'll do what's right, whatever the peace teach. Sam turned back. His eyes were dry now, hard as the desert stone. The strong box, under the schoolhouse. I've never looked for it, never opened it if I found it. That was Rachel's wish. She said only you should see what's inside. Why? Because only you would know what to do with it. Sam moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Justice, she said, not revenge. Can you tell the difference anymore? Graves asked. Sam didn't answer. He walked out into the heat, into the glare, into a world that had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. Bill was waiting outside, rifle across his arms. Well, we're going to the schoolhouse, Sam said. Tonight, after dark. What's there? Everything Rachel died protecting. Everything Blackwell's afraid of. Bill studied his friend's face. Saw something there that made him grip his rifle tighter. Sam, what are you planning? I'm planning to keep a promise. The one I made to her and the one I am about to break. Behind them, Clayton Wade watched from the window of the saloon. He saw Sam's face, saw the set of his shoulders, saw the way he moved now. Not like a shopkeeper, like a hunter. Clayton turned to Dutch. "It's started," he said quietly. "Whatever piece Sam Bennett found here, it's over." Dutch grinned. "Good, I was getting bored." Clayton didn't respond. He was thinking about a daughter in Santa Fe, about a debt 20 years old, about how the worst moments in life were never the ones you expected. They were the ones where you had to choose between two things you couldn't bear to lose. And somehow, no matter which you chose, you lost them both. Midnight in the Arizona desert was a different world. The brutal heat surrendered to cold that seeped into bones and made breath visible. Stars crowded the sky in impossible numbers so bright they cast shadows. The moon hung full and pale, turning Red Creek Junction into a landscape of silver and black. Sam Bennett moved through those shadows like he'd been born to them. 20 years of selling flour and nails hadn't erased the skills that had made him the best tracker in the Texas Rangers. He knew how to step silent, how to use darkness, how to become invisible when he needed to. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden structure Rachel had fought for 5 years to get built. She'd taught there for 3 years before the consumption, before what Sam now knew was poison, had weakened her too much to stand before a classroom. He approached from the east, using the building itself to shield him from the saloon where Clayton's men were drinking. Bill Dawson covered him from the church bell tower, rifle ready, old cavalry instincts sharp despite the years. The schoolhouse door was unlocked. It always was, Rachel had insisted. Knowledge should never be locked away, she'd said. Sam slipped inside, waited, let his eyes adjust to the deeper darkness within. The familiar smell wrapped around him. Chalk dust, wood polish, the faint sweetness of the apples children sometimes brought their teacher. Rachel's ghost lived here stronger than anywhere else in Red Creek Junction. He lit a small lantern, kept the flame low. A voice spoke from the corner. "I was wondering when you'd come." Sam's hand dropped to his Colt, had it halfway drawn before he recognized the speaker. Doc Harriet Kane stepped into the lamplight, hands visible and empty. She was 42, lean and competent, with intelligent eyes and hands scarred by years of frontier medicine. She'd been in Red Creek for 7 years, had treated everything from snake bite to bullet wounds with equal skill. "Doc," Sam said, lowering the gun, "you about gave me heart failure." "Wouldn't be the first time tonight." She nodded toward the floor. "Third board from the east wall. I've been guarding it since sunset." Sam looked where she indicated. One board was slightly raised, disturbed. "You knew." "Rachel told me. 2 days before she died, made me promise to protect it if anyone came looking." "Why didn't you tell me?" Harriet's expression was complicated, sad and determined at once. "Because we both loved her, and she loved you enough to want you free. Free from this." She gestured at the floor, at the secrets buried beneath. "Free from becoming that man again. The one with the gun and the badge and the body count." Sam knelt beside the board. His hands found the edge, pried it up. The wood came free with a soft groan. Beneath lay a cavity about 2 feet square, lined with oilcloth to keep moisture out. Inside the cavity rested a metal strongbox military issue, the kind used to transport payroll during the war. It was locked with a heavy padlock. Sam lifted the box, heavier than it should be. Not just papers, then. Something else. "She gave you the key?" he asked. Harriet pulled a length of ribbon from around her neck. A small key dangled from it. "She said when you came for it I should help you open it, but I should also tell you something first." "Tell me." "She knew what was in here would change you, would make you choose between the man you'd become and the man you used to be, and she was terrified you'd choose wrong." Sam took the key. Their fingers touched briefly. Harriet's hand was cold. "There is no right choice anymore," Sam said quietly. "Clayton Wade has 3 days to bring Blackwell this box or that railroad. Barron will erase this town like it never existed. The only question is whether I go down quiet or fighting." Rachel would say there's always another option. Rachel's dead because she tried to find another option. The words came out harsher than he intended. Harriet flinched but didn't back away. Sam fitted the key into the lock, turned it. The mechanism clicked. He opened the lid. Inside, carefully organized, lay the evidence of 3 years of careful investigation. Maps with routes marked in red ink, railroad surveys, legal documents, witness statements written in Rachel's neat hand, photographs of families who died, death certificates signed by Judge Crane without autopsy, and beneath all that small brown bottles, arsenic. Purchase receipts showing Judge Crane's clerk buying them from a pharmacy in Tucson, dates corresponding to when families started showing symptoms. Sam's hands shook as he lifted out a folder. Inside were testimonies from 12 families, stories of pressure threats, mysterious accidents, all leading back to one name, Cornelius Blackwell, railroad baron, land speculator, murderer. Dear God, Harriet whispered as she documented everything. Sam found a letter addressed to the territorial marshal in Prescott. Rachel had written it but never sent it. He understood why. Once sent, there was no taking it back, no protecting the people she'd interviewed, no keeping herself safe. She'd been planning to send it, had been building an airtight case, but the poison had worked faster than she'd anticipated. At the very bottom of the box lay a contract. The railroad route Blackwell had submitted to the territorial government in a month. The line ran directly through Red Creek Junction. Through the land Blackwell was buying cheap and would sell to his own company at enormous profit. Sam sat back on his heels, the enormity of it settling over him like a physical weight. He's going to kill this whole town, he said. Not with guns, with economics. The railroad will come through whether people sell or not. But if they don't sell cheap, now Blackwell will ruin them with legal fees, fraudulent claims, accidents. He'll grind them down until they have nothing left. Unless someone stops him. Unless someone stops him. A sound outside, boots on gravel, multiple sets. Sam killed the lantern instantly. Moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could see 3 men approaching the schoolhouse, Dutch Morgan and 2 others. They know we're here, Sam said. Harriet's breath caught. How? Doesn't matter. We need to move. Now. But Dutch was already at the door, kicking it open, moonlight silhouetting his bulk. Well, well, the shopkeeper and the lady doc, cozy. Sam stepped between Harriet and Dutch. His hand rested on the Colt. Leave. This doesn't concern you. Dutch laughed. Everything in this town concerns us now, old man. Boss wants that box. You just saved us the trouble of digging for it. The 2 men with Dutch spread out, flanking. Professional, prepared. Sam did the math. 3 armed men, him with a pistol, Harriet unarmed, the strong box too heavy to run with. Bill in the bell tower, but too far away to help before this went bad. Dutch pulled his gun. Here's how this works. You hand over the box. We don't kill the lady. Simple. Here's how this works. Sam said, his voice gone cold and flat. You leave right now, or I put bullets in all 3 of you before you can blink. Dutch's smile widened. Big talk for an old man who couldn't even land a punch this afternoon. That was me being peaceful. You don't want to see me the other way. Something in Sam's tone made Dutch hesitate. Made him look closer at the man standing in front of him, at the way Sam stood balanced on both feet, at how his gun hand hung loose and ready, at eyes that had gone empty of everything except lethal calculation. One of the other men, younger and less experienced, made the mistake of going for his gun. Sam moved. 20 years fell away in an instant. The Colt cleared leather faster than the eye could follow. The first shot took the young man's gun out of his hand. The second hit his shoulder, spinning him around. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. The third man froze, hand on his gun, but not drawing. Dutch tried, got his weapon halfway up before Sam's Colt was aimed directly at his face. Don't, Sam said quietly. Dutch stood motionless, gun half drawn, staring down the barrel of Sam's Colt. 3 feet away, no way to miss, no way to survive if Sam decided to pull the trigger. You're fast, Dutch said, surprise and respect fighting with anger in his voice. I used to be faster. Clayton was right. You are Deadeye Sam. Was, past tense. Now I'm just a man trying to live quiet. But you boys keep pushing. Dutch slowly lowered his gun, let it drop to the floor. We'll tell Clayton you're not as soft as you look. You do that. Dutch started backing toward the door. His companion helped the wounded man up, and they stumbled out into the moonlight. Sam stood at the window watching them go. His hand was steady, but something inside him was shaking. Not fear, recognition. He'd just done what he swore to Rachel he'd never do again. He'd become Deadeye Sam Bennett. and God help him, it had felt natural. Harriet moved beside him. She pulled bandages from her medical bag, already preparing for what came next. "You're bleeding," she said. Sam looked down. Dutch's man had gotten a knife into him during the fight. Not deep, but bleeding freely. He hadn't even felt it happen. "Sit," Harriet ordered. He sat. Let her work. The pain came now sharp and insistent. She cleaned the wound, stitched it with efficient movements. Her hands were steady, professional. "This changes things," she said quietly. "Yeah. They know what you can do now. They won't underestimate you again." "Good. Maybe they'll leave. Or maybe they'll come in force next time." Sam didn't answer, because she was right and they both knew it. Morning came with the kind of heat that made you question your life choices. By 8 o'clock, the temperature was already climbing toward unbearable. By 9, the whole town knew about the fight at the schoolhouse. Cornelius Blackwell arrived at 10. He came in a private railway car that had been shunted onto the siding of the small depot Red Creek Junction maintained for the stage line and freight wagons. The car was painted a deep burgundy with gold trim, the kind of luxury that announced wealth and power without saying a word. Blackwell himself was 58, dressed in an expensive suit, despite the heat, with silver hair and a face that had spent most of its life smiling at people while calculating their worth. He walked down the steps of his private car like a man descending from Olympus to deal with mortals. 6 armed guards accompanied him, not cowboys, not drifters, professional security men who moved like military. Clayton Wade met him at the depot. They spoke briefly, Clayton's face growing harder with each word Blackwell said. When Blackwell handed him a telegram, Clayton read it and then crumpled the paper in his fist. Sam watched from the window of his mercantile. He'd been awake all night cataloging the contents of Rachel's strongbox, making copies of the most important documents. The originals he'd given to Bill Dawson to hide. The copies he'd given to Reverend Graves with instructions to send them to the territorial marshal if anything happened to him. Now he watched Blackwell and Clayton. Watched how Blackwell spoke, and Clayton listened with the posture of a man being given orders he couldn't refuse. Bill appeared beside him. "That's Blackwell." "Yeah, he doesn't look like much. The dangerous ones never do." At 11, the church bell rang, not for services, for a town meeting. Blackwell had called it. Everyone in Red Creek Junction was expected to attend. Sam strapped on his gun belt and walked to the church. The building was packed. Every family, every business owner, every soul with a stake in Red Creek Junction's future crowded into the pews and aisles. The heat was oppressive. Women fanned themselves. Men sweated through their shirts. Children fidgeted. Blackwell stood at the pulpit like a visiting dignitary. Reverend Graves sat to the side, his face carefully neutral. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwell began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "I come to you today with an opportunity. The railroad is coming to Arizona. Progress is inevitable. The only question is whether you prosper with it or get left behind." He unfolded a map. The proposed route showed the line running directly through Red Creek Junction. "This town sits on land that will be worth 10 times its current value once the railroad comes through. I'm offering to buy your properties at fair market prices, more than fair. Generous, in fact." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blackwell let them build before continuing. "I know there have been unfortunate rumors, questions about other towns, other families. Let me be clear, those situations were tragic, but they were also the result of stubbornness, of people who refused to see opportunity." He paused for effect. "I don't want that to happen here. Red Creek Junction is a good town. Honest people. Hard workers. You deserve to benefit from progress, not be crushed by it." Thomas Fletcher stood up. He was 29, married with 2 children, worked a small farm at the edge of town. "What happens if we don't sell?" he asked. Blackwell's smile never wavered. "Then the railroad will still come through. Eminent domain is a powerful legal tool, but the prices will be set by courts and lawyers, and I guarantee they'll be far less generous than what I'm offering today." "That's extortion," Fletcher said. "That's progress," Blackwell corrected gently. "I didn't make the laws, son. I just understand how to work within them." Sam stood up. The church went quiet. "You killed my wife," he said. His voice was level, but it carried to every corner of the building. Blackwell turned to look at him. If he was surprised, he hit it well. I beg your pardon. 3 years ago, Rachel Bennett, you poisoned her because she was documenting your land fraud. Gasped from the congregation. Blackwell's expression shifted, became harder. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Bennett. I hope you have proof. Sam held up Rachel's strongbox. Every eye in the church fixed on it. I have 3 years of documentation. Witness statements, death certificates, purchase receipts for arsenic, maps showing your actual route versus the route you filed with the territorial government. Everything needed to put you in prison for the rest of your life. The church erupted, people talking over each other, questions, shouting fear and anger, mixing into chaos. Blackwell raised his hand. The noise subsided. Let me understand this, he said calmly. You're accusing me of murder based on papers your late wife allegedly gathered. Not allegedly. She documented everything, including the 12 families you destroyed to clear your route. And you plan to do what with this evidence? Take it to the territorial marshal. Already done. Copies are on their way to Prescott. Judge Crane is finished. You're finished. Blackwell studied Sam for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not the smooth public smile. Something colder. You've made a mistake, Mr. Bennett. A fatal one. He turned back to the congregation. I'm withdrawing my offer, effective immediately. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, I'll file eminent domain claims on every property in this town. And I promise you the legal battle will bankrupt every family here before you see a single dollar. He walked toward the door, paused beside Sam. Your wife was an idealist, he said quietly. She thought evidence mattered, that truth mattered. But out here, the only thing that matters is power. And I have more of it than you can possibly imagine. He left. His guards followed. The church remained silent for a full minute after he was gone. Then everyone started talking at once. Thomas Fletcher pushed through the crowd to reach Sam. You just declared war on us, he said. Not accusing, just stating fact. I declared war on him. This town doesn't have to be involved. We're already involved. We live here, our families are here, and now Blackwell's going to destroy us all to get to you. Martha Hayes, a widow who ran the boarding house, stepped forward. Maybe we should just sell, take his money and start over somewhere else. There is no somewhere else, Sam said. This is your home, your land, your lives. You sell now, you'll regret it for the rest of your days. At least we'll have days, another voice called out. Better than being dead. The crowd began to fracture. Half wanted to trust Sam to fight. Half wanted to take Blackwell's offer and run. Reverend Graves stood at the pulpit. We need to vote, he said. All those in favor of selling, raise your hands. 30 hands went up, maybe more. All those in favor of fighting, 40 hands, including Thomas Fletcher's. The fight wins, Graves said, but barely, and I suspect after people think on it, those numbers might change. The meeting dissolved. People filed out, avoiding Sam's eyes. Some looked angry, some looked scared. All looked uncertain. Bill waited outside. That went well, he said dryly. Could have gone worse. How? Before Sam could answer, a rider came thundering down the street, one of Blackwell's guards. He rode directly to the railway car, dismounted, ran inside. 5 minutes later, the car's whistle blew. Steam hissed. The car began moving, backing toward the main line. He's leaving, Bill said. Sam shook his head. He's repositioning, getting somewhere safer before this gets ugly. How much uglier can it get? As if in answer, Clayton Wade emerged from the saloon. He walked straight towards Sam, ignoring the townspeople who scattered from his path. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to draw if needed. We need to have a conversation, Clayton said. Private. Sam nodded. They walked to the edge of town, to a spot where the desert began and civilization ended. Bill followed at a distance, rifle ready. Clayton pulled out a telegram, handed it to Sam. It read, Your daughter's school had unfortunate fire drill today. She's safe for now. Get me that box, or next time it won't be a drill. Sam read it twice, looked at Clayton, saw something broken behind those steel eyes. Emily, Clayton said. His voice was rough. She's 12, likes horses and books, and hasn't done a damn thing to deserve being dragged into this. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't help. The box does. Sam folded the telegram, handed it back. I can't give you the box, but I might be able to help you get Emily back. Clayton's laugh was bitter. How you planning to ride to Santa Fe and shoot your way into a school guarded by Blackwell's men? If I have to. They stared at each other. Old enemies, old debts, old promises made and kept and now being tested. Why would you help me? Clayton asked. Because 20 years ago you could have shot me in the back. You didn't. Now you're being forced to do Blackwell's killing. You don't want this any more than I do. Want doesn't matter. He has my daughter. Then we get her back, together. And then we both have something Blackwell wants, leverage. Clayton was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. I've got 3 days. After that, Blackwell said he couldn't finish the sentence. Then we've got 3 days to end this. They shook hands. The grip was firm, final. Two men choosing a side they never wanted to be on. Sam rode out at dawn the next morning. Bill Dawson beside him, both mounted on strong horses, both armed heavy. The plan was simple. Ride to Prescott, 2 days hard travel, deliver Rachel's evidence directly to the territorial marshal. Get federal law involved before Blackwell could lawyer his way out. Simple plans rarely survive contact with reality. They were 5 miles out of Red Creek Junction when the shot came. Bill's horse screamed and went down, legs buckling. The animal hit the ground hard, pinning Bill's leg beneath its body. The sound of the rifle shot arrived a second later, flat crack rolling across the desert. Sam was moving before conscious thought. Off his horse rifle in hand, scanning for the shooter. There, on a rock outcrop 300 yards distant, Finn McReady, the Irish sniper, already working the bolt on his rifle for a second shot. Sam fired. Too far for accuracy with iron sights, but close enough to make Finn duck. Bought them seconds. Bill's whine. Legs caught. Horse is dead weight. More riders appeared. Dutch Morgan and 3 others coming fast from behind a rise. They'd been waiting. Tracking. Professional ambush. Sam grabbed all Bill's arms, heaved. The horse was too heavy. Bill's leg wedged too tight. Another shot from Finn's rifle kicked up dirt 2 feet away. No time. Sam left Bill the rifle, drew his Colt, and sprinted for the rocks. Running serpentine using every scrap of cover. Bullets tracked him. Dutch and his men shooting from horseback, accuracy terrible, but volume making up for it. Sam made the rocks. Turned, fired 3 carefully aimed shots. Dutch's horse went down. One of the other riders clutched his arm, wounded. They scattered, seeking cover. But Finn was still up on his outcrop, still aiming. And now he had a clear shot at Bill, who couldn't move, couldn't run, was trapped under a dead horse in open ground. Sam watched Finn's rifle swing it toward Bill. Watched the sniper settle in, breathing steady, about to make a shot that would kill Sam's oldest friend. Sam stood up, fully exposed, waving his arms. Here, I'm here. Finn's rifle swung back toward him. Sam dropped behind the rock as the bullet hit where his head had been. Chips of stone stung his face. He'd bought Bill maybe 30 seconds. Not enough. But then a new sound, hoofbeats from a different direction. Clayton Wade appeared riding hard, 2 men with him. Not attacking, not helping, just watching from a rise 200 yards away. Finn saw Clayton. His rifle wavered. Uncertainty. Clayton made a hand signal. Finn lowered his weapon. Dutch, bleeding from a bullet graze across his ribs, pushed himself up from cover. Boss, we got them pinned. Clayton's voice carried across the desert. Stand down, Dutch. What? We can finish this. I said stand down. Dutch started to argue. Clayton's hand dropped to his gun. Dutch went quiet. Sam used the pause to run back to Bill. Together with adrenaline-fueled strength, they heaved the dead horse, enough for Bill to pull his leg free. It was badly bruised, maybe fractured, but not crushed. Can you ride? Sam asked. Not well, but better than dying here. They got Bill onto Sam's horse. Sam would walk, leading the animal, rifle ready. Clayton rode closer, stopped at talking distance. You've got maybe an hour before Blackwell hears I let you go. After that, he'll send more men. Better men. Why let us go at all? Because I'm done. Done following orders that make me a murderer. Done sacrificing what's left of my soul for a man who'd kill my daughter the moment she stopped being useful. Sam studied him. You're choosing a side. I'm choosing my daughter. If that means siding with you, so be it. Blackwell will kill her for this. Not if we get to her first. Sam made a decision, pulled Rachel's copied documents from his saddlebag, handed half to Clayton. If I don't make it to Prescott, you do it. Get these to the marshal. Make sure Blackwell hangs. Clayton took the papers. And Emily. There's a woman in Red Creek. Doc Harriet Kane, smart, capable, and she doesn't owe Blackwell anything. Tell her I sent you. She'll help. They parted ways, Clayton riding east toward Santa Fe and his daughter. Sam walking west, leading Bill's horse, trying to get back to Red Creek Junction before everything fell apart. They made it 3 miles before Bill's leg gave out completely. The pain that he'd been gritting through finally overwhelmed him. He slumped in the saddle, barely conscious. Sam got him down, examined the leg in the harsh morning light. Broken, no question. Bone grinding against bone. Bill's face was gray with shock and pain. Leave me, Bill said. Take the horse. Get to town. Not happening. Sam, you can't carry me and watch your back. Watch me. He got Bill back on the horse, tied him into the saddle so he wouldn't fall, then started walking, leading the animal rifle in one hand, eyes scanning constantly for threats. The sun climbed. The heat became murderous. Sam's canteen ran dry. His shoulder wound from yesterday reopened, blood soaking his shirt. His cracked ribs ground together with each breath. But he kept walking. By the time Red Creek Junction came into view, it was mid-afternoon. Sam was staggering. Bill was unconscious from pain. The horse was nearly spent. And surrounding the town, arranged in a loose perimeter at all the approach roads, were Blackwell's men. At least a dozen, maybe more. A siege. Sam stopped just outside rifle range, studied the situation. No way in without being seen. No way to fight through that many guns. No good options at all. Then a figure appeared on the road ahead. Reverend Graves walking slowly, hands raised and visible. He reached Sam, breathing hard. They came an hour ago, Blackwell's orders. Nobody in or out until you hand over the box. The town, scared, half want to give you up, half want to fight. It's tearing us apart. And you, Graves looked at Bill, at Sam's wounds, at the blood and exhaustion. I'm a man of God, Sam. I believe in miracles, but I also believe in practical action. And right now, practical says we need help that isn't coming. Sam looked at the town, at the people he'd lived among for 15 years. Good people, honest people, about to be destroyed because of choices he'd made. Get Doc Kane, he said. Bill needs surgery. I'll create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Sam checked his Colt. 5 rounds left. Checked the rifle. Half a magazine. The kind that gets people's attention. He walked forward, alone, toward the men surrounding his town, toward the fight he'd spent 20 years avoiding. And behind him, in Red Creek Junction, people watched from windows and wondered if this was the day peace finally died. The men at the perimeter saw him coming, a lone figure on foot carrying a rifle, walking with the slow inevitability of a man who'd made his choice and would see it through no matter the cost. Word spread fast. Guns came up. Horses shifted nervously. Dutch Morgan stepped forward to meet him. His ribs were bandaged where Sam's bullet had grazed him that morning. The wound had made him meaner. You got some nerve, old man, walking right up to us. Sam stopped 20 feet away, speaking distance, shooting distance, if it came to that. I want to talk to Blackwell. Dutch laughed. Blackwell don't talk to dead men. I'm not dead yet. Give it time. Sam's eyes swept the perimeter, counting men, counting guns, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. You boys are making a mistake, he said, loud enough for all of them to hear. Blackwell's using you. When this is done, when the law comes asking questions, you think he'll protect you. You're expendable. Just like the men who poisoned my wife. Just like the men who burned families out of their homes. Some of the hired guns shifted uncomfortably. Not all of them were killers. Some were just cowboys who'd taken a job that paid better than punching cattle. Where are those men now? Sam continued. The ones who did Blackwell's dirty work before you. Anyone seen them? Anyone know their names? Silence, because the answer was obvious. Blackwell left no witnesses. Dutch's hand dropped toward his gun. Enough talk. I agree, Sam said. He raised his voice, projecting across the desert. I'm going back to town now. Anyone wants to stop me, now's your chance. He started walking, not toward Dutch, around him, toward Red Creek Junction. Dutch drew. I said stop. Sam kept walking. A shot cracked out, kicked up dirt at Sam's feet. Sam stopped, turned slowly. His right hand hung loose near his Colt. His face was empty of expression. "You boys have a choice to make," he said quietly. "Let me pass or find out why they used to call me Deadeye Sam Bennett." Dutch's gun was already drawn, aimed at Sam's chest, but his hand was shaking slightly because he'd seen Sam shoot in the schoolhouse, had seen how fast he was, how accurate. 20 feet was a long distance for a pistol. But for a man with a rifle already drawn, it was nothing. And Dutch had just watched Sam walk 5 miles carrying a wounded man through desert heat with blood soaking his shirt and exhaustion weighing every step. Had watched him keep going when any reasonable man would have quit. That kind of will was more dangerous than any gun. "Let him through." The voice came from behind Dutch. One of the other hired men, an older cowboy with gray in his beard. "What?" Dutch spun. "I said let him through. I signed on to intimidate people, not murder a man walking home." Blackwell said, "Blackwell's not here, and I'm done taking orders from a man who pays with blood money." The cowboy holstered his gun, turned his horse, rode away. 3 others followed him. Dutch watched them go. His face was purple with rage, but now his numbers had shrunk, and Sam was still standing there, waiting patient as stone. "This ain't over," Dutch said. "No," Sam agreed. "It's not." He walked past Dutch, past the remaining hired guns. None of them moved to stop him. Reverend Graves met him 50 yards from the perimeter with a wagon. Bill was already loaded in the back, semi-conscious. Doc Kane was with him, her medical bag open, preparing for surgery. "Get him to my office," she told Graves, "and get me clean water, lots of it." The Reverend drove off. Sam stood in the street watching the town watch him. He could feel their fear, their anger, their desperate hope that somehow this would all work out. Thomas Fletcher approached. His wife and children were with him. The kids looked scared. "Mr. Bennett," Fletcher said, "I'm with you, whatever you need." "Tom, you should get your family somewhere safe." "There is nowhere safe, not anymore. So we might as well stand." Other people emerged from buildings. Not all of them, not even half, but enough. Merchants, farmers, the blacksmith, the schoolteacher who'd replaced Rachel. They didn't say much, just stood there. A silent declaration that this was their town and they wouldn't be run out. Sam felt something loosen in his chest. He'd been alone for so long, carrying everything himself, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have people at his back. "All right," he said, "here's what we do." They gathered in the church. Sam spread a map on a table, began marking positions, explaining fields of fire, creating overlapping zones of defense. Old Ranger training coming back. How to defend a position against superior numbers. How to make the enemy pay for every inch. "They're not going to charge," he explained. "They'll try to starve us out. Cut off water, food, wait until we're desperate. So we need supplies centralized. Families move into the church and the school. Easier to defend, easier to provision." "What about our homes?" someone asked. "They're just buildings. They can be rebuilt. Your lives can't." They worked through the afternoon, moving supplies, positioning riflemen, preparing for a siege that was coming whether they wanted it or not. As the sun set, Sam climbed to the church bell tower. Bill was in surgery, Harriet working by lamplight to set his shattered leg. Sam stood alone in the tower, looking out at the perimeter, at the campfires of Blackwell's men dotting the darkness. Footsteps on the ladder. Harriet emerged, wiping blood from her hands. "Bill's leg is set. He'll live, but he won't be fighting." "I know." She stood beside him, looking out at the same fires, the same darkness. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You could slip out tonight, ride to Prescott, bring back the law. By the time I get back, this town will be ash. Maybe, but you'd be alive." Sam thought about Rachel, about her journal, about the promise she'd asked him to keep. Justice, not revenge. But what was justice when the system was corrupted? When judges and marshals and politicians were all bought and paid for? Maybe justice was just another word for standing your ground when everything told you to run. "I spent 20 years running from who I was," he said. 20 years pretending that peace was possible if I just stayed quiet enough. But Rachel knew the truth. Peace isn't the absence of fighting. It's knowing what's worth fighting for. Harriet was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I was married once, long time ago. He was a doctor too, better than me. Smarter, more skilled. He died trying to save a patient during a cholera outbreak, exposed himself to infection when he could have stayed safe. She paused. I used to think he was foolish, throwing his life away for someone he couldn't save anyway. But now I understand. Some things you can't walk away from and still live with yourself. Sam looked at her, really looked. Saw the strength there, the determination, the quiet courage that frontier life demanded. Thank you, he said. For what? For standing, when you could have run. She smiled slightly. Where would I run to? This is home. These are my people. And you? She hesitated. You're not as alone as you think you are. Their hands touched briefly. Then she descended the ladder back to her patients, back to the work of keeping people alive. Sam remained in the tower as full dark settled. He'd unpacked his gun belt, strapped it on properly for the first time in 20 years. The weight felt right, familiar, like greeting an old friend you'd hoped never to see again. From his vest pocket, he pulled his Texas Ranger badge. Tarnished, dented, but still solid. He pinned it to his vest, not because he was a ranger again, those days were done, but because the badge represented something, a promise, to stand between good people and bad men, to draw a line and say this far, no further. A figure appeared on the street below. Clayton Wade riding in alone, hands visible and empty. Sam descended the tower, met Clayton in the street. Your daughter. Safe. Doc Kane got a message through to the school. Emily's with a friend's family. Blackwell's men were watching the school, but they didn't know to watch the back where the kitchen staff goes. Relief washed over Clayton's face for the first time in days. So now what? Sam asked. Now I testify against Blackwell, but I need to know we're going to survive long enough for that to matter. We'll survive. You sound certain. Sam looked at the church, at the school, at the buildings where frightened families were huddling together in the dark. At the town he'd tried so hard to be invisible in. I'm not certain of anything, he said, except that I'm done running, done hiding, done pretending that being peaceful is the same as being good. Clayton nodded slowly. You know this might not end well. Most things don't. They stood in silence, two old enemies who'd become unlikely allies waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. And in the darkness beyond the town, Dutch Morgan watched through a spyglass. Saw Sam with the badge on his vest. Saw Clayton Wade talking like a friend instead of an enemy. Dutch turned to Finn McReady. Send a telegram to Blackwell. Tell him we need more men. Tell him Bennett's organizing a defense. And tell him, Dutch smiled mean and anticipatory, tell him it's time to stop playing games. Time to remind this town what happens when you fight progress. Finn went to send the message, and the night grew darker still. Dawn came with fire, not the clean fire of sunrise, but the ugly fire of arson. 3 buildings on the eastern edge of Red Creek Junction went up simultaneously, flames leaping 30 feet into the gray pre-dawn sky. The bakery, the feed store, a family's home. Sam was running before he was fully awake, boots barely laced, gun belt grabbed and strapped on, while moving. Other men poured from the church and school where families had consolidated for safety. They formed bucket brigades hauling water from the well, fighting flames that Blackwell's men had set from beyond rifle range. By the time they got the fires under control, the sun was fully up and brutal. 3 buildings were reduced to smoking ruins. No casualties, thank God. The families had been evacuated the day before, but the message was clear. Blackwell could reach them whenever he wanted, and he'd keep reaching until they broke. Dutch Morgan stood on a ridge half a mile out, visible through a spyglass, watching Red Creek burn, making sure they saw him watching, making sure they understood this was just the beginning. Sam stood in the ashes of the bakery, soot blackening his face, hands blistered from hot bucket handles. Thomas Fletcher stood beside him, equally filthy, equally exhausted. This is what fighting gets us, someone said from behind them. Martha Hayes, the boarding house owner. Her voice was bitter. Burned homes, ruined livelihoods. And for what? So you can play hero? Sam turned to face her. I'm not playing anything. Blackwell was going to take this town whether we fought or not. At least this way, we're taking some of him with us. Are we? Because from where I stand, we're the only ones losing. A crowd had gathered, people who'd spent the night huddled in fear, who'd watched their neighbors' homes burn, who were starting to wonder if surrender might not be so bad after all. Blackwell made an offer, Martha continued. Fair price for our land. Maybe we should take it. Start over somewhere else. There is no somewhere else, Sam said. You think he'll honor that deal? The moment you sign, you're at his mercy. He'll change the terms, delay payment, tie you up in courts until you've got nothing left. You don't know that? I know men like him. I've been hunting men like him for 30 years. They don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They take everything and leave nothing. Thomas Fletcher stepped forward. Mr. Bennett's right. My grandfather built our farm with his own hands. 40 years of sweat and blood in that soil. I'm not handing it over to a railroad baron who'll tear it up and forget it ever existed. Noble words, Martha said. But will they keep your children alive when Blackwell's men come in the night? Sam had no answer for that, because she was right. Noble words didn't stop bullets, didn't prevent fires, didn't protect the innocent from men who dealt in violence and fear. The crowd began to fracture again, some nodding at Martha's words, others standing firm with Thomas. The town tearing itself apart from within, which was exactly what Blackwell wanted. Doc Harriet Kane emerged from the church, Bill Dawson limping beside her on crutches. Bill's leg was splinted and wrapped his face gray with pain, but he was upright and mobile. Enough arguing, Bill said, his cavalry officer's voice cutting through the noise. Here's reality. We're surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned, classic siege situation. I've been through 3 of them, 2 as defender, 1 as attacker. Defenders always lose unless they get reinforcements or the attackers give up. Not helpful, Bill, Sam muttered. I'm not done. Defenders lose when they fight on the enemy's terms. We change the terms, we change the outcome. How? Thomas asked. Bill looked at Sam. How far to Prescott? 2 days hard ride. And Blackwell knows that, which is why he's got the roads covered. But what about the old Apache trail through the canyon? Sam frowned. That trail's been abandoned for 20 years. Half of it's washed out. But passable, maybe. If you don't mind risking your neck on loose rock and switchbacks barely wide enough for a horse. Can Blackwell's men follow? Not unless they know it exists, and even then not in force. Too narrow. Bill smiled grimly. Then that's your route. You and Clayton, fast horses, light gear. Get to Prescott before Blackwell realizes you've gone. Bring back federal marshals. That leaves the town without defenders. The town has me, and I may be one-legged right now, but I can still shoot. So can every man here. We hold for 3 days. That's all we need. Sam looked at the faces around him. Scared faces, determined faces. People who'd chosen to stand despite every rational reason to run. 3 days, he said. Can you hold that long? Bill's expression was serious. I held Shiloh Church for 2 days with 20 men against 200. This'll be easier. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But sometimes lies were all you had. Sam and Clayton left at midnight, leading their horses through the back alleys of Red Creek Junction until they reached the canyon trail. The moon was a sliver, barely enough light to see by. Perfect for sneaking past sentries. Finn McReady watched them go from his perch on the ridge. His rifle was within reach, but he didn't take the shot. Just watched through his spyglass as 2 riders disappeared into the darkness. Then he went to find Dutch. They're running, Finn reported. Bennett and Clayton, heading for the canyon trail. Dutch's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Get the boys mounted. We'll run them down before they reach Prescott. But Finn shook his head. That trail's suicide in daylight, impossible at night. They know it. We don't. We follow, we die. Then what? We go around, push hard for Prescott, get there first, set up an ambush at the marshal's office. Dutch considered. Blackwell won't like us leaving the siege. Blackwell wants Bennett dead more than he wants this town burned. We bring him Bennett's body, he'll forgive anything. They rode out an hour later. 6 men, including Dutch and Finn, the fastest riders, the best shots. Heading east on the main road while Sam and Clayton struggled west through treacherous terrain. The canyon trail was every bit as bad as Sam remembered. Narrow switchbacks carved into rock face. Sections where erosion had eaten away half the path. Places where one misstep would send horse and rider tumbling 300 feet to the rocks below. They moved at walking pace, leading the horses when the trail got too dangerous to ride. The night was cold at this altitude. Their breath steamed, the stars wheeled overhead indifferent to human struggle. Clayton spoke quietly as they navigated a particularly treacherous section. You know this might not work. Even if we reach Prescott, even if the marshal believes us, Blackwell's got lawyers and judges in his pocket. Could take months to bring him to trial. I know. And Red Creek might not last months. I know that too. They reached a wider section, mounted up, pushed the horses faster. Time was bleeding away. Every hour they spent on this trail was an hour Blackwell's men tightened the noose around Red Creek Junction. Dawn found them halfway to Prescott, exhausted and saddle sore. They stopped at a spring to water the horses to chew on jerky and hardtack that tasted like leather. Clayton pulled out a photograph. A young girl with dark hair and her father's steel gray eyes. Emily, safe now hidden with friends, but still a target if Blackwell got desperate enough. She's all I got left, Clayton said quietly. Her mother died when she was 6. Fever. I raised her alone, tried to give her better than what I had. You did good. Did I? I'm a man who's killed for money, who's threatened innocent people because I was too scared to say no. What kind of father does that make me? Sam thought about Rachel, about the years they'd had together, about the promises he'd made and broken and made again. The kind who's trying to do better. That's all any of us can do. They rode on. The terrain flattened as they descended from the mountains toward Prescott. By mid-afternoon, they could see the town in the distance, and they could see the dust cloud from riders approaching fast from the south. Dutch had beaten them here. Sam and Clayton reined up behind a rock formation, studying the situation. 6 riders were entering Prescott, heading straight for the marshal's office, setting up exactly the ambush Finn had predicted. They'll watch the office, Sam said. Wait for us to walk in, shoot us in the street and claim self-defense. So what do we do? Sam was quiet, thinking. Then he pulled Rachel's documents from his saddlebag. I go in the front, loud, make them focus on me. You slip in the back, get the papers to the marshal while they're distracted. That's suicide. Only if they're faster than me, and I don't think they are. Clayton studied his face. You're really willing to die for this town, for people you barely know. I'm willing to die for the idea that good people shouldn't have to live in fear of bad men. If that includes this town, then yeah, I'll die for it. They split up. Clayton circled wide, approaching Prescott from the north. Sam rode straight in down the main street in full view of anyone watching. Dutch saw him first, whispered to Finn. The trap was set. They spread out along the street, casual but positioned, waiting for Sam to get close to the marshal's office before they made their move. Sam rode past the saloon, past the general store. His hand rested loose on the reins, but his eyes tracked every shadow, every window, every place a gunman might hide. He dismounted 50 feet from the marshal's office, tied his horse, started walking. Dutch stepped into the street behind him. Finn appeared on a rooftop to the left. The other 4 spread out in a semicircle. That's far enough, Bennett, Dutch called. Sam stopped, turned. His hand hung near his Colt. You boys are making a mistake. No mistake, just finishing what we started. The only thing you're finishing is your own rope. Federal marshals are already looking into Blackwell. You pull those guns, you're not just murderers, you're cop killers. Dutch's laugh was ugly. We'll take our chances. Behind them, unnoticed, Clayton Wade slipped through the back entrance of the marshal's office. Found Marshal James Hendricks, a weathered man of 60, with a badge he'd worn honestly for 30 years. Dropped Rachel's documents on his desk. Read these, Clayton said, then get every deputy you have got. Hendricks looked at the papers. His expression changed. He grabbed his gun belt, started shouting for his deputies. On the street, Dutch and his men drew their weapons. Sam drew faster. His first shot took the gun from the hand of the man to his right. The second shot hit Dutch high in the shoulder, spinning him around. Non-lethal, professional. Finn's rifle cracked from the rooftop. The bullet took Sam's hat clean off his head. Sam dove behind a water trough, came up shooting. His third shot forced Finn to duck. The other men scattered, seeking cover, returning fire. Bullets chewed up the wood of the trough, sent water gushing. Then the marshal's office doors burst open. Hendricks and 4 deputies, all armed, all angry. Federal Marshal, Hendricks roared. Drop your weapons now. The gunfight froze. Dutch looked at the deputies, at Sam, at the blood running down his arm. The math was suddenly very different. One by one, Blackwell's men laid down their guns. Hendricks walked to Sam, who was standing now, Colt still drawn. "You Sam Bennett?" "Yes, sir." "The documents your friend brought me, they're genuine. Every word. Rachel Bennett spent 3 years gathering that evidence. Blackwell had her killed for it." Hendricks' face hardened. "Then Cornelius Blackwell is under arrest. And these men are accessories to murder." He turned to his deputies. "Lock them up, all of them, and send a telegram to the territorial governor. Tell him we're coming for a railroad baron." Blackwell got the news by telegram that evening. His men arrested, federal marshals en route. Evidence of his crimes in official hands. The carefully constructed empire he'd built through decades of corruption and violence was crumbling. He didn't panic. Men like Blackwell didn't panic, they adapted. Within an hour, his private railway car was detached from the siding at Red Creek Junction and attached to the westbound express. Destination California. From there, Mexico. From there, anywhere the law couldn't reach. He took Emily Wade with him. The girl had been recaptured from her hiding place by men Blackwell kept in reserve for exactly this kind of emergency. She was 12 years old, terrified, and now the only leverage Blackwell had left. Clayton found out when he and Sam returned to Red Creek Junction with Marshal Hendricks and a dozen federal deputies. The town was battered but standing. Bill Dawson had held the siege, though it had cost them. 2 men dead, 5 wounded, half the buildings on the east side burned to foundations. But they'd held. Clayton's face went white when he learned about Emily. "Where Blackwell's private car," Reverend Graves said, "attached to the westbound express 2 hours ago. He's running." Sam looked at Clayton, saw the desperation there, the fear of a father who'd lost his child once and couldn't bear to lose her again. "How fast is that train?" Sam asked Hendricks. "Hits 40 miles an hour on the straightaways. Can we catch it on horseback?" "Not a chance." Sam thought fast. "What about the eastbound express? When's it due?" Graves consulted the schedule board. 20 minutes, but it's going the wrong direction." "Not if we commandeer it." "Turn it around. Chase Blackwell's train west." Hendricks stared at him. "You're talking about a train chase. You got a better idea." The marshal was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled grimly. "I always wanted to try that." They assembled quickly. Sam, Clayton, Finn McReady, who'd agreed to testify against Blackwell in exchange for leniency, Hendricks, and 4 deputies. The eastbound express rolled into the station. Hendricks flashed his badge, explained the situation to the engineer. 5 minutes later, they were racing west, coal shoveled into the firebox, the locomotive straining to reach speeds it was never meant to sustain. The Arizona landscape blurred past. Desert mountains, canyons carved by ancient rivers. The train swayed on the tracks, wheels screaming on curves. In the locomotive cabin, the heat was brutal, the noise deafening. Finn stood on the cold, tender spyglass to his eye, watching the horizon. "There," he shouted. "Smoke 3 miles ahead." They were gaining. The westbound express was heavy with freight cars. Blackwell's private car was at the rear, luxury weighing it down. The eastbound express stripped to just the locomotive, and a single car was faster, lighter, built for this chase. 2 miles, 1 mile, half a mile. Close enough to see the westbound train clearly now. To see Blackwell's burgundy car at the end windows curtained defensive and final. Clayton was already moving toward the front of their locomotive. "Get me alongside. I'm jumping." "You'll be killed," Sam said. "She's my daughter." There was no arguing with that. Sam looked at the engineer. "Can you match speed?" "I can try." The trains ran parallel, now separated by 20 feet of empty air. The gap narrowed. 15 feet. 10. Clayton didn't wait. He ran, leaped, arms outstretched. For a moment, he was airborne, suspended between 2 locomotives, hurtling through the desert at 40 miles per hour. His hands caught the railing of Blackwell's car. His body slammed against the side feet, scrambling for purchase. He hauled himself up, climbed to the roof. Sam followed. Then Finn. Then 2 deputies. Leaving Hendricks and the others to control their locomotive. The roof of a moving train was its own special hell. Wind tore at them, threatened to rip them off and throw them to the desert floor, flashing past below. The train swayed and bucked. Every rivet, every seam was a potential death trap. They moved forward, crawling, inching toward Blackwell's car. A window shattered. Gunfire. Blackwell's remaining bodyguards shooting from inside the car. Finn returned fire with his rifle. Precise shots that forced the guards to duck, bought them seconds to advance. They reached the rear car. Clayton kicked in the door. Inside was luxury, velvet curtains, polished wood crystal decanters, and at the far end, Cornelius Blackwell holding a pistol to Emily Wade's head. The girl was crying, terrified, but alive. "Far enough," Blackwell said calmly. "One more step and I paint these expensive walls with her brains." Clayton froze. His gun was drawn but useless. Any shot risked hitting Emily. Sam stepped forward, hands visible and empty. "It's over, Blackwell. Federal marshals have your records. Your men are arrested. Your empire is finished." "Perhaps, but I'm not. Let me off this train. Let me reach the border and the girl lives." "You'll kill her anyway. You don't leave witnesses." Blackwell smiled, not the smooth public smile, something colder. "True, but this way she dies later. Gives her father a few more hours of hope. Isn't that worth something?" The train hit a curve. Everyone swayed. In that moment of instability, Emily twisted, sank her teeth into Blackwell's gun hand. He screamed, jerked back. The gun went off. The bullet hit crystal, sent glass exploding. Clayton fired, not at Blackwell, at the coupling connecting the private car to the rest of the train. The heavy bullet struck the coupling pin. Once. Twice. The third shot sheared it completely. The private car separated, began to slow as the rest of the train pulled ahead. Sam lunged forward, grabbed Emily, threw her to Clayton. Father and daughter crashed together, holding each other as the decoupling car rocked and slowed. Blackwell raised his gun, aimed at Sam's head. Sam could have drawn, could have fired, could have ended it right there. But he saw the other door opening, saw Finn McReady with his rifle already aimed, saw the federal deputies climbing onto the car from the other direction. Blackwell was surrounded, finished, beaten. Sam holstered his weapon. "It's done," he said quietly. "You're done." Blackwell's hand trembled. For a moment, Sam thought he might shoot anyway. Might go out in violence because he'd never known any other way. Then Marshal Hendricks was there, gun drawn, voice carrying the weight of federal law. "Cornelius Blackwell, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, corruption, and about 40 other charges I'll think of on the way to court. Drop the weapon." Blackwell looked around, at the guns pointed at him, at the law he'd always managed to buy or intimidate now standing firm and incorruptible, at the empire he'd built crumbling to dust. He dropped the gun. The trial took place in Prescott 3 months later. By then, Blackwell's network had unraveled completely. Judges, politicians, land speculators, all the men who'd enabled his crimes scrambling to make deals and save themselves. Judge Hosea Crane never made it to trial. They found him in his study the night before he was to testify, a bullet through his brain, and a note that simply read, "I'm sorry." Sam attended the trial every day, sat in the back of the courtroom watching justice grind forward with agonizing slowness. Lawyers argued procedure, witnesses were questioned and cross-examined, evidence was presented and challenged. It wasn't the clean, simple justice Rachel had hoped for. It was messy, complicated, imperfect. But it was real. Clayton Wade testified, told the court everything. His crimes, Blackwell's crimes, the network of coercion and murder that had enabled it all. The prosecutor offered him a deal. 5 years in prison in exchange for his testimony. Clayton took it. 5 years was better than hanging, and Emily would wait for him. He'd already made arrangements with a good family in Prescott to take care of her while he served his time. The trial lasted 4 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all charges. Blackwell showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Just stood there, shoulders straight, face empty. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in the territorial prison. Not life, not hanging, just 15 years. It felt inadequate, insufficient. A man who'd caused so much death and suffering, who'd destroyed families and corrupted institutions, getting less time than some men got for stealing horses. But it was something. And in the imperfect world Sam had lived in for 48 years, something was often all you got. After the sentencing, Marshal Hendricks found Sam on the courthouse steps. "You did good work, Bennett, the kind of work we need more of. I could use a man like you. Federal deputy pays decent, comes with a badge and the authority to hunt men like Blackwell across territorial lines." Sam looked at the badge Hendricks held out. Shiny, official, a return to the life he'd left 20 years ago. "I appreciate the offer, Marshal, but I'm done hunting men." "You sure you're good at it?" That's the problem. I'm too good at it. And every time I do it, a piece of who I want to be dies. Eventually, there's nothing left but the hunter. Hendricks nodded slowly. Rachel would be proud of you. Rachel would tell me to go back to Red Creek and sell flour to honest people. Then that's what you should do. They shook hands. Sam walked away from the courthouse, away from the badge, away from the chance to be Deadeye Sam Bennett again. He walked toward the train station, toward home, toward a life that was damaged but salvageable. Red Creek Junction was rebuilding. The burned buildings were being replaced. New lumber, new paint, new hope. The siege had cost them, but they'd survived. And survival bred a kind of stubborn optimism. Sam reopened his mercantile 3 days after returning from Prescott. The shelves were sparse supplies hard to come by while they rebuilt. But people came anyway. Not just to buy flour and nails, but to talk, to share stories about the siege, to process what they'd survived together. Thomas Fletcher's wife had died during the siege. Not from violence, but from fever that Doc Kane couldn't treat while bullets were flying. Thomas was raising his 2 children alone, now trying to work his farm and care for them at the same time. He brought them to the mercantile one afternoon. The boy was 10, the girl was 6. Both were too quiet, too serious for their ages. "Mr. Bennett," Thomas said, "I wanted to thank you for everything." "I didn't do anything worth thanking. You stood when you could have run. That's worth something." The boy, whose name was Daniel, was staring at Sam's gun belt. Sam still wore it now, though he'd taken to keeping the Colt unloaded. Old habits died hard. "Is it true you were a Texas Ranger?" Daniel asked. "A long time ago." "Did you shoot bad men?" Sam knelt down to the boy's eye level. "Sometimes, when there was no other choice." "My pa says you're a hero." "Your pa is being generous. Heroes don't exist. Just people trying to do right and sometimes getting lucky." Daniel looked disappointed. Sam understood. The boy had just lost his mother. He needed heroes, needed to believe the world had people who could protect him from all the terrible things that lurked in darkness. "Tell you what," Sam said, "you're old enough to learn responsibility. How about I teach you to shoot properly, safely, so when you're grown you can protect your family the way your pa protected this town?" The boy's eyes lit up. Thomas looked uncertain but grateful. They started the next Sunday. Sam took Daniel out to the desert, set up tin cans, taught him the fundamentals. Stance, breathing, sight, picture, trigger, squeeze. The same lessons Sam had learned 40 years ago from a cavalry sergeant who'd believed that men with guns had responsibilities. "Why didn't you kill Mr. Blackwell?" Daniel asked one afternoon. Sam lowered his rifle, thought about how to answer. "Because killing should always be the last choice, not the first, not even the second or third. You exhaust every other option before you take a life." "But he was bad." "He was, and he's in prison now. Justice got him without me becoming a killer." "But you've killed before." "I have, and I carry those deaths with me every day. They don't go away, Daniel. They don't fade. Every man I've killed is still with me, whispering that maybe there was another way I didn't see." The boy was quiet, processing this. Too much weight for a 10-year-old, but frontier life didn't wait for children to be ready. Weeks became months. Red Creek Junction healed slowly. The railroad eventually came through, but on terms the town had negotiated with new lawyers and honest judges. The land sales were fair, the compensation adequate. People stayed. Doc Harriet Kane kept her practice. Became essential to the town's survival in ways that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with strength. She and Sam had dinner sometimes. Quiet evenings where they talked about books and weather and small things that didn't involve guns or death. No romance bloomed. They were both too scarred for that. But a friendship grew steady and sustaining. Bill Dawson recovered enough to walk without crutches, though his leg would never be the same. He spent his days in a rocking chair on the mercantile's porch, telling stories to anyone who'd listen about the siege, embellishing details until they bordered on mythology. Clayton Wade served 3 years of his 5-year sentence before being released for good behavior. He collected Emily and disappeared into California, sending Sam one letter that simply said, "Thank you, we're building something good here, something worth the price we paid." 1 year after the trial, Sam took his Texas Ranger badge from the wall where he'd hung it. He looked at it for a long time, remembered the man who'd worn it, the skills, the certainty, the violence. Then he put it in a wooden box, closed the lid, and placed it on the highest shelf in his bedroom. Not thrown away, Not forgotten, just set aside, because some parts of yourself you couldn't erase. You could only choose not to let them define you. He returned to the mercantile, to the counter where Rachel's coffee cup still sat, to the life he'd tried so hard to build and had nearly destroyed defending. The bell above the door chimed. Daniel Fletcher came in, a rifle under his arm, bright-eyed and eager. "Mr. Bennett, can we practice today?" Sam looked at the boy, at the future walking in through his door, asking him to pass on what he knew. Not the violence, not the darkness, but the responsibility that came with power. "Yeah," Sam said, "we can practice." They walked out to the desert together, teacher and student, carrying weapons that could kill but hopefully never would. Sam set up the can, stepped back, watched Daniel take his stance. The boy's form was good, breathing steady, finger resting alongside the trigger guard until ready to shoot. "Remember," Sam said, "with skill comes responsibility. You're learning to protect, not to destroy. There's a difference, Ukis." "What's the difference?" "Intent, purpose, knowing when to shoot and when to lower the gun and walk away." Daniel nodded seriously, took aim, squeezed the trigger. The can flew backward, ringing. "Good shot," Sam said. They practiced until the sun started its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Then they walked back to town together, rifles unloaded, danger temporarily set aside. Sam looked at Red Creek Junction as they approached, the town that had nearly died. That had been saved not by one man's heroism, but by many people's stubborn refusal to surrender. Behind them, the desert stretched, vast and indifferent. Ahead, lights began appearing in windows as families prepared for evening meals, for the small rituals that defined human connection. Sam thought about Rachel, about her journal and her evidence, and her belief that truth mattered, that justice was worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed hopeless. He thought about the men he'd killed and the men he'd spared, about the choices that defined a life and the prices those choices demanded. Some men are born for peace, he thought, born gentle and stay gentle. Others earn peace through blood and fire, through learning the hard way that violence is easy and restraint is hard. He'd earned his peace twice. Once when he'd left the Rangers and married Rachel. Again when he'd defended Red Creek Junction and then chosen to return to quiet anonymity rather than embrace the life of a hunter. Both times the cost had been steep. Both times he'd paid it willingly. "Mr. Bennett," Daniel's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Are you all right?" Sam looked down at the boy, at the next generation already learning to carry weapons, but hopefully also learning when to set them down. "I'm fine, son. Just thinking." About what? About redemption, Sam thought. About second chances and third chances, and whether a man could ever truly leave his past behind or if he just learned to carry it better. About home, he said instead, and how sometimes the hardest thing to do is just stay put and live quiet. They reached the mercantile. Daniel ran off to his father's farm. Sam climbed the steps to his porch, sat in the chair Bill usually occupied, and watched the sun finish its descent. The desert cooled. Stars emerged. Red Creek Junction settled into evening, peaceful and ordinary, the way towns should be. And Sam Bennett, former Texas Ranger, former gunfighter, former hunter of men, sat in the darkness and let the peace he'd earned wash over him. He'd stood between good people and bad men. He'd drawn a line and held it. And now, finally, he could rest. Not forever. There was no forever in this world. But for now, for this moment, for this quiet evening, in a town that had survived against impossible odds. For now, that was enough.